All right, guys, thank you for your patience. I'm Amanda Fargo Johnson. I am the Ag Program Director at Connecticut RC&D. We have a variety of programs related to soil health and energy and agriculture. We also have environmental programs too. For our purposes today, I'm going to be touching on the farm energy program. So I'm, I guess, in the middle between Jason and Ray in the sense that our programs aren't just for efficiency or just for renewable. We're sort of the go-to person to help you fund these projects, whether it's for efficiency or renewable. So we have a website that's outside of our parent website, which is ctfarmenergy.org. All our resources are available there. And so why is on-farm energy usage important? So some people might contact us and say, I want to do a solar field, or I'm interested in this or that. Our focus really is to work with farms and ag-based rural small businesses offset on-farm energy. So we're really not getting involved with some of those larger scale projects unless it relates to offsetting the farm's energy. And typically we find 1/4 to 1/3 of all operating costs for Connecticut farms are related to their energy costs. And so we find that reducing your dollar spent is the best dollar saved. And that's the programs that Jason was referring to when it comes to energy efficiency first. As Ray knows, a lot of people will call and say, I want to do solar. That's fantastic. But do you have an efficient operation to begin with? Is your greenhouse spewing out energy and heat? Is your barn got, gaps and leaks and not efficient? So we work with farms to come up with a good phase, if you will, phase 1, phase 2. We might do energy efficiency work with them first, and they come back to us, and now we're thinking about, excuse me, solar or geothermal. This is kind of a quick snapshot of what's available in terms of funding options for Connecticut farms. And we're going to step through a couple of these, and Ray's going to step through the other ones. And so you'll notice through my presentation that I like to put a lot of farm pictures in there because farmers relate to other farmers and the projects that they do. So some of the farms that we've worked with have done smaller, more residential scale type systems. Maybe they're offsetting 80% of their needs. Others might be larger projects. They're only offsetting 50% of their needs. The goal is always to try to get you as close to 100% offset as possible. So where do we start? So generally, when we're looking at energy efficiency, you need to have some sort of energy assessment or an energy audit. And so Jason touched on one of them. You can get a free assessment through SBEA. And so once you figure out what those options are and what you want to do for a project, you can come to us and we'll help you put the pieces together to fund it. And then one program specifically, we can handhold you through the process. So another option for a very comprehensive, detailed audit would be through our partners at USDA NRCS. Apologize for the alphabet soup. There's a lot of acronyms. It's the world we live in, right? So if you wanted to have an ag energy management plan, you could connect with USDA NRCS. Vivian's here with us today from the agency. And you could talk a little bit more with her about applying for something like that. But it's going to look at your whole operation and it's fuel blind. So once you, I'm not expecting you to read this, by the way. Once you have an ag energy management plan and it identifies some concerns, you can then go back to USDA and NRCS and ask them to help you incentivize paying for those upgrades. So there's a lot of incentives that they have as a practice that's approved for our state. So that's just to show you an example of that. Where I'm going to focus more of my presentation today is on what USDA Rural Development has to offer. And so in the umbrella of USDA in our state, you're going to see NRCS, Farm Service Agency, which Amy's here today, and Rural Development. They're kind of your active players in the state with staff. So Rural Development has a Rural Energy of America program. We call it REAP. And it can incentivize efficiency or renewable energy projects. It's not one or the other. And so what it can't do though, is it's for the business. It's not for any residential benefit. So we can talk a little bit about that. It can't pay for vehicles or tillage equipment or anything like that. It also doesn't relate to new construction. So that's why I thought it was important for Jason to talk about new construction. Much like NRCS, rural development wants to identify a concern. In this case, it's energy, and help you fix a problem. If you're starting brand new, they don't have an incentive for new construction. So that's why it's important to utilize what the utilities have. So USDA is obviously by the government fiscal year, which started in the fall of last year. And it's a big year for REAP because of the Inflation Reduction Act. We're seeing a lot more money being infused into the program like we've never seen before. And so this just kind of gives you an idea of what the uptick is going to look like. And so the biggest change for us is that usually the REAP grant means 25% grant for your eligible project cost. So if you have a $100,000 project, you're applying for a $25,000 grant. They increased that because of the IRA dollars. So now you can ask for up to 40%. So that's a game changer for some farms. So now what you used to be asking for a $25,000 grant is now $40,000. So they also increased the caps for efficiency and renewable, so you can ask for more as well. So eligibility is usually the first question we kind of go through with folks. You can either apply as an ag producer, making 50% or more of your income for the applicant entity from ag production. You can be anywhere in the state. You can be, in an urban setting, downtown Hartford, New Haven, Torrington, wherever. If that's not the case, then you have to be a rural small business. So we have a MAP program that we run your address and make sure that you are SBA compliant based on your NAICS code. Also, the project that you do has to be commercially available, off-the-shelf technology. It can't be something that's never been done before. And again, cannot benefit a residence. So I think we covered most of this. The other nuance about eligibility is that sometimes we work with farms that are nonprofits. And if you're if you can qualify as an ag producer, making 50% or more of your income in production as a nonprofit, then you're eligible. Otherwise, generally speaking, nonprofits are not eligible for this program. You do need to have an energy audit for efficiency programs. And you do need to realize that this is not a reimbursement program. You can't install the project and come over and say, hey, Amanda, help me apply for a grant. So any costs that you incur pre-application submission would not be deemed eligible by USDA. And you also have to be in good standing with the government. That's helpful. So this kind of breaks down what are some eligible costs, what are not eligible costs. So, any sort of permits or fees, reinforcement sometimes for a roof or solar, those sorts of things are eligible. Just running electric power, that's not typically an eligible expense. So we have minimums and maximums depending on if you're doing an energy efficiency project or you're doing renewable. And then of course the maximums got doubled this year. There's some projects that we've done together, Ray. Maybe you'll touch on them, but we've been doing this program. We started in 2009. We started helping farms apply for this REAP grant. And the reason why was because people were not applying. There's a lot of paperwork, I'll be honest, but there's parts for you, there's parts for your contractor. We oversee the whole process. We make sure you have the strongest application going in. We compile it and we submit on your behalf. And as a result, we've installed about $25 million worth of projects since then. Another project in your area would be White Flower Farm. They're a great example of, we've done some smaller projects at their farm, but we've also done some larger retrofits at their processing facility in Torrington. And we've done a couple solar projects with them as well. Freund's Farm up here, it was a new construction barn, so we didn't do any, they worked with the utilities for the mechanicals, but then we helped them put the solar on their roof. And then if anybody did have gas, Gilberti's is a good example. We worked with UI to retrofit their heating. This is sort of a snapshot of what's required. There's sort of standard forms, and then there's a main application form depending on the size of your project. So we walk you through this whole process. Some other things that are required. You need to have an EIN number, a DUNS number, a cage code. If you don't know what some of those are, we can help you with them. You need to have proof of ownership and control of the land that the project's going to be sited on. So that's either, you know, you own it or you have a long-term lease for the useful life of the system. We usually want 12 months of utility bills, documentation of that you have matching funds for the project, and so on. Some other things to note, this is a competitive application process. So we have a state allocation that you can compete for. They're scored and ranked. And so the top score working their way down is funded. Anyone who isn't funded can then compete with the national competition. So we work with you and your contractor to get the application completed. And here's a breakdown for the scoring points. So this is where we watch the points and we make sure that, you know, you're getting the most points that you can utilize in an application. So when can you apply? There's rolling deadlines. They're standard. Essentially, USDA has a restricted pool and an unrestricted pool of funds. And what that means is anyone asking for a grant of $20,000 or less competes in its own pool, rather than having to be in the unrestricted when you're competing with bigger projects. So they split the restricted pool, that small pool, in half. Half the funds are available October 31st. The other half are available March 31st every year. But if you're interested in getting a grant over 20 grand, then the only chance to apply would be the March 31st deadline. So we're coming up on that. We're already working with farms to complete their application. I will note that they do have a guaranteed loan option. They're not giving you the loan. You still have to go through your lender of choice. It's just they're guaranteeing that loan for anyone who might be challenged to get the loan on their own. And there's a fee associated with guaranteeing that for you. Some more projects in your neighborhood that we've worked on. I'm gonna just make note of this, but Ray's gonna go into detail. If anyone's familiar with what used to be called, you know, net metering or virtual net metering and the ZREC program, that was changed and merged into a new program into last year. And so there's a couple options where you either go into a buy-all program or a netting program. And so Ray's gonna touch on that. But my reason for having these in the slides is just to say that this is another example of leveraging. So for efficiency projects, we typically leverage the REAP grant with what the utilities have to offer. That's kind of the efficiency path. Or you can work with NRCS and the utilities. You just can never leverage both federal incentives together. And then for the renewable side, if you want to do geothermal or solar, we've done one hydroelectric project before. We leverage the state utility program. So now this new utility program with REAP. So it just depends on what type of project you're looking to accomplish. We help you try to leverage them. Sometimes people don't know how they're going to pay for something. So know that Connecticut Green Bank, through their cpace program, has a program that the loan is going on the property, not to you personally. So if anyone's interested in that, I can connect you to Peter Ludwig over there. We also have a program that we launched last summer where we're providing direct assistance and assessments to eligible farms. We've contracted with NSAVE out of Vermont, and they will work with you one-on-one to develop a third-party plan. What do you need in terms of sizing? What should this cost you? If you're interested in those in that service, there's handouts on the back table about that. Just a way for you to get some assistance outside of it being a contractor. You know, you're getting that third-party view. We do a variety of pilot projects at RC&D. One related to energy was a compost heat recovery. I think in the questions that came in ahead of time, there was some interest on how, you know, alternative ways to heat a greenhouse. So we use this working on a dairy farm to expedite their composting facility. And then the recovered heat was used to heat hot water in the dairy operation and air heating. But we've seen these used in greenhouse operations. So something that you could consider. Digesters were mentioned. We've got, Freund's Farm has a digester, but it's not connected to the grid. So Fort Hill Farm in Thompson was the first one in the state that actually connected to the grid to produce electricity. And we're working on a second project with High Tone Farm in Coventry. So that's of interest. We can talk to you on that. And on a bigger scale, you know, always thinking about pushing the envelope and thinking about agrivoltaics and dual use. What does that look like? Usually it means it's going to cost a little bit more in order to do that. But just know that our friends in Vermont, Massachusetts are hard at working, doing that. And I think policy and things like that might eventually support more of that here. So on our website, we do have some farm energy videos. Paley's is featured as one of them there in Sharon. We worked with Ray on their project. So sometimes it's nice to hear farmer to farmer. I'm out of Yukon Extension in Haddam. Jacob Charette is the energy coordinator for rural development. So you could reach out to either of us if you have questions. And then if you have questions. Yeah, so it just depends on what you're doing. Like for an energy efficiency project, it would be a much shorter lease that would be required versus something like solar. Mm-hmm. So they're using it for heat recovery. You're talking about the anaerobic digester? Yeah, that's because they're using the heat internally. Theirs is an older system, you know, was pretty pioneering at the time, but they never connected it to the grid. The ones that we're working with are dealing with food waste and, you know, want to offset the farm's electrical needs. Yeah, so generally like the on-farm energy offset is usually 100%. Like we're trying to get to 100% with the REAP grant. We do have it where if it was on its own, like the farm's own meter and you were overproducing, we've had cases where we will, and you know, incentivize that. You just may score lower. Because anything over 100%, generally you're not getting like the full value, but a lot of farms we work with. Well, unless you're doing the buy all program. Yeah. So the whole, are you talking about the old net metering program? Yeah, so there's a whole new program now. So it used to be where netting was that 1-for-1, and then at the end of the year, if you overproduce, you're only getting the wholesale rate. Now they're valuing you in real time as a monetary credit of that KWH, either netting or buy all. So Ray will talk a little bit about that.